A senior analyst at Signal Risk, a company that specializes in risk management on the African continent. He joins us now from Cape Town in South Africa. Good to have you with us, Daniel. As we can see there, this conflict has been a long-running one, and now it seems that M-23 rebels have made significant advances in the city of Goma. What's your reaction to these latest developments? Can this offensive be halted?
I don't think so. At this stage, there's reports coming out probably in the past hour that they've managed to take Goma International Airport, which ever since advancing into the city on Sunday has been kind of a key strategic target for them. There's been pockets of resistance within the city. There's been lots of MONUSCO personnel that have already moved over into Rwanda. There are some Congolese military units that have surrendered already, but there are equally others that are continuing to fight. You also have state-aligned militias in the city that are also fighting M23. You also have SADC regional forces that are equally in the city. However, at this stage, it appears that M23 is pretty much on track to completely secure the city in the next day, if not the coming hours, despite what has been quite a valiant effort from state-aligned forces to push back against M23 and its Rwandan troops in support.
And we've heard reports that the M23 rebels say their aim is to protect the rights of the minority Tutsi population in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So it sounds like there is an ethnic angle there to this conflict. But is that the only issue here? Is there more at stake? Or what do you think is the main aim of the rebels?
Yeah, it's a bit of a multifaceted one because, in 2012, when they launched their rebellion, the FDLR Hutu extremist group, which is the one, that you referenced in the historical component of the segment, they were still quite a big problem. They weren't necessarily committing the extent of genocide against the Tutsis that were being, accused at the time, but they were still a proper problem and they still presented a threat to Rwanda. However, part of the 2012-2013 agreement that brought an end to that M23 conflict was to dismantle the FDLR. Rwanda and Congolese forces, did a number of operations in the region to neutralize and kind of like stop the expansion of that group quite a bit. So they are effectively a lot smaller than they were. So the extent to which the Hutu extremists present a threat is substantially less than what the argument they're making at the moment is. That's not to say that there's not an ethnic component to this. That threat posed by the Hutu extremist groups is far more. It is inflamed a bit on the narrative side in terms of Rwanda and M23, where really what it seems like, M23 along with Rwanda is seeking long-term occupation of North Kivu province. The most recent United Nations report announced that basically, we've seen this huge influx of minerals. Illicit logging and all of these types of things into Rwanda that is supporting its economy. M23 is also exerting taxes. There's money being generated from that. So yes, there is an ethnic dynamic to this, and one cannot ignore the FDLR. But in terms of making it out to be the sole reason that they're there, doesn't make any sense because again, the nature of their threat, has dramatically diminished over the past decade. Having covered the Congo for the past 7 years. I can't say the group has come up as much as, talks of M23 in the past couple of years, and other groups that pose much more of a risk, to regional stability. So, yeah, it is very much overstated in terms of the ethnic dimension. And I think, there is a monetary and territorial control dynamic to this conflict as well.
As we saw in that timeline, every time the conflict has flared up, we have seen the two sides manage to agree on some sort of a peace to, at the very least, cease the intense hostilities. But as we know now, it seems that the rebels are making a significant advance in Goma. The African Union, as well as the United Nations Security Council, are really looking to end those hostilities. What, in your view, can be done in order to have the both sides at least put down their arms for the time being?
It's difficult. I mean, the big question now is, what does dialogue even look like? If M23 and Rwanda's long-term ambition is territorial control, what type of dialogue would the Congolese government agree to in that sense, So I think at the moment, the biggest thing is that you would have to exert external pressure on both Rwanda and M23 to say, listen, you have to withdraw to a certain extent to give enough time to allow for these conversations to happen. The problem is you would have to convince the Congolese government to enter the negotiation table after this massive escalation. So it's very difficult. Ultimately, I think the main component here is external pressure would have to be placed on Rwanda specifically, because they've been quite steadfast in their demands in previous engagements. At the last second changing their demands and then collapsing talks. So I think external pressure would need to be placed on Rwanda so that it could accept terms that it previously wouldn't, so that they can get back to the table and engage in dialogue. But once again, even if you manage to get them to the table and start those discussions over the longer term, what does that dialogue look like if you already have a group that appears intent of holding territory over the long term? And like I said, it is different to 2012, where you had the dynamic of there was obviously an ethnic component to defeating the FDLR a lot more than what we're seeing now. So in terms of motivations going forward, I think we'll have to see over the next coming days in terms of what M23 is willing to agree to, and what the Congolese state is willing to agree to. But in terms of the coming weeks, it'll be very difficult to bring the two sides to any tangible dialogue. And over the long term, obviously, there are numerous risks to the longevity of these things.
Okay, Daniel van Dalen, we will have to leave it there, but thank you so much for explaining all of that for us. Appreciate it.